Good afternoon, my name is Liam McGovern, and today I'll be delivering a clinic around empowering coaching. So, just a brief introduction to start us off. Today we'll be talking about American football and how is this resource original. It's really off the basis of that American football is not talked about in the psychological standpoint, and specifically for creating motivational climates for their players. Why American football? Personally, I play the sport, so I feel like this is a topic I'd be interested in explaining, going into more depth about. And you'll be seeing some pictures of the Patriots because I'm a fan of them. So, just a brief overview. What is empowering coaching? It's based off two base theories, the achievement goal theory and the self-determination theory. And today we will be looking at autonomy and motivational climates in particular. So the first theory is the achievement goal theory. It covers two different types of competence, task and ego competence. Now, task competence is where the athletes compare their performance against themselves, and they're always looking to get 1% better. This is more focusing on the mastery side of the sport and not really focused on the result of a game. In contrast, ego focuses on the result of a game, and players who are oriented in this way perceive themselves as better than others and want to be better than others and will compare themselves to others continuously. So what does this look like in our sport? In American football, you get a lot of people who just want to get better, and obviously for those who are ego-oriented, you always get those people on the team that really aren't invested in just that one goal, winning. And the examples later on, we can investigate that further. And the second theory is the self-determination theory. It goes off the basic needs theory, just for today, and it covers these three needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy is when the athlete feels like they have a choice in their behavior and are not fully restricted to the coach's requirements for the session. This is important in American football as in match time scenarios, entropy is in excess or in high amounts, and we as coaches want to make sure our athletes feel comfortable with improvising in order to keep the play alive. Competence, as explored previously or mentioned previously, it involves the athlete achieving mastery in an action or exercise. So if you're a quarterback, you want to get really good at throwing the deep ball. You want to have, some essence of competence as an athlete. You want to enforce that so they can get better at that one aspect. And then we have relatedness, which is where the athlete has the ability to relate to others, primarily their teammates. I do talk about this further in my individual report, so it will be explained more then. Here's a graph of the theory itself. Now, how can we use these in our sessions? As coaches, we want to create a motivational climate for our players, and our focus will be on encouraging the basic needs explained in the self-determination theory with a specific focus on autonomy. We also want to encourage task competence. As explained before, we know what task competence is now, and we know that autonomy is, giving the athletes some freedom to do specific actions on the field. So we're going to now be looking at the idea of a motivational climate. What do we mean by that? Is a motivational climate is influenced by a series of factors, mainly the coach behavior, athlete relationship with their peers, their own love for the sport, the state of the game at the time, all of those play a part. So exactly what do we mean by this? I just explained it right there. And the first one we'll be looking at is an unmotivational climate called ego involving. Here are the key aspects where mistakes are often punished, biased treatment is given out, and let's see what some consequences are. It's probably intra-team rivalry, unhealthy competition, and feuds are created as a result. What can we think about an example here? If we look at this picture here and here, the coach in American football is obviously being very verbal with the player. This is, looks unhealthy, I would say, and you don't, obviously the first picture, the quarterback has their head down after probably making a mistake. So we put this into an example. In a match game scenario, a quarterback might make a mistake that shouldn't have happened, like throwing an interception or throwing a bad ball. And after the play is dead, the coach would then come over and be like, what the heck are you doing? Why didn't you throw to this guy? And obviously, as a player, I've actually experienced that, and I know it's evident in the sport. So, I think it's a good, very evident example to give in this clinic. And if you feel like you are that kind of coach that has done that, maybe it's time to rethink and maybe we'll put some interventions in place to figure out how to change that. All right, so the second unhealthy motivational climate is called controlling climate. This is where the coach generates an environment where pressuring and intimidating the athlete is acceptable. And this is very common in professional football and college level sports, and even in high school. All right, the stigma has been created in America that to be a football player, you must be able to handle anything that is thrown to you. Coaches do not approach this appropriately. I've seen personally in the show called Last Chance U that the coaches there are very, very verbal, and they punish and punish and punish. I feel like these two climates are very similar, controlling and ego. I feel like controlling is a lot more on the dangerous side. This is where you drive the players away, where they won't return to football at all. So we want to prevent this. If we put this into an example, you get like a offensive lineman that is not being that strong off the ball, and if their coach is insulting them and intimidating them, saying that they're weak, who wants to play for that kind of coach? We don't want to enforce that kind of behavior. Now, in contrast to those two climates, we'll look at the motivational climates now, and the first one is called task involving. As I said before, we want to actually enforce this heavily, as it has an emphasis on trying your hardest, and there's predominant skill focus in this climate with team building and chemistry. So this is all we want to enforce here, especially at the ages of 17 and up, not getting to very young adult stage is we want to enforce this on, because in the UK, American football, you start around 16, 17 years old, and you want to make sure that they are welcomed into the sport, and we teach them the fundamentals, and we teach them that team building essence of the sport, and that it's one goal, one family, and you just want them to try your hardest. See that picture there? You want to be a coach that will, get along with your athletes, so they will want to play for you. Now, the second one is called autonomy supportive, where the athlete's opinions and preferences are heard and feelings from the athlete are considered. The coach gives athletes more freedom to justify their actions, as we're talking about that high entry state of a game. We want to give them the allowance. We want to say in practice, when a receiver comes up saying, can I run this route like this or that? The coach will, should allow that and be like, okay, let's hear your reasoning for it, justify why you want to do that, and if it's acceptable, the coach should allow it because it might help us win a game. So ultimately, this autonomy is good to give the athlete some freedom, but is this really, really effective in American football? As coaches, we want to give them freedom, yeah, but in the sport specifically, there are rules to be followed, and we can't be breaking those rules all the time. Now, the third is called socially supportive, where the coach shows empathy and we are coaching people, not athletes. I feel this is so, so important. This article here is a different resource for empowering coaching, where this guy says that, we should be able to manage people, the young men, young women that play the sport, and not just focus them as the athletes. We will be successful if we can relate to them on a human level. And obviously, this duo here, they've won so many Super Bowls because they probably relate to each other. They understand each other as people, not players and coaches first. We need to encourage that. One example would be if a player is having a bad day, shows up to practice, you can't just ignore it for the whole practice. You got to ask them how you're doing. I'm part of a team now where we emphasize that family aspect, where you just want to be, communicating with each other, asking people how you're doing, and it just makes them feel welcome. So, just a brief overview to finish up. American football is a complex sport with complex environments and challenges, and as coaches, we must aim to make our athletes' time at practice and in games as linear as possible. Applying these scenarios as described to your practice will better your athletes, your coaching personnel, and you. Thank you.